Hello, my name is Eve McIntyre. I'm a cognitive behavioural psychotherapist. I hold full accreditation with the BABCP. My video for today is discussing depression. I will outline the symptoms people can experience when they're depressed. I'll talk a little bit around what we can understand about why we experience depression, how cognitive behavioural therapy can be helpful, and if depression is something you're experiencing, how you're able to seek support. So when we think about the symptoms of depression, this may differ a bit person to person, but it may include sort of changes in sleep patterns, feeling more lethargic, lacking motivation or interest, lower levels of energy, and also I guess kind of often what I find when I work with people that have depression is sort of a real sort of sense of disconnect with those around them or the things that they might normally do. It's really similar to if you sort of imagine being sort of in a bubble where you can see and hear everything that's going on around, but you perhaps don't anchor into it in the same sort of way or feel that same level of enjoyment. It's really different from having sort of a moment of feeling quite blue or having a low day. It's natural with our sort of emotional makeup as humans that we are all going to have low days from time to time. What distinguishes depression from feeling blue or having low days is that it's often much more pervasive, it lasts a longer period of time, it's much more enduring, and also it tends to have quite a big impact on the person's life that's experiencing it. On people that have feelings of depression, I guess sort of what they often report in the therapy work I do is the sense of kind of almost knowing what would make them feel better, but just not having that level of kind of motivation to do it and just feeling so flat within themselves to engage in it. So in a way, I guess kind of there's this really awful sort of catch-22 that sort of plays out when we experience depression. We can know what maybe would make us feel better, but actually we don't have the same level of motivation to do it. And actually if we don't have that motivation to do it, we're then less likely to sort of engage in it. And in that respect, we can almost sort of feel quite stuck in those feelings of depression, and it can just be really awful for the person that's going through that. So if we think about understanding why we may experience depression, this can be a really big area. So I'm going to try and keep it brief and sort of close to kind of a CBT way of thinking about depression and why we feel that way. So it's reasonable, I guess, to sort of think actually when key life events happen, such as the loss of a loved one, redundancy, that we may experience depression. What can be quite interesting though is actually depression occurs a lot of the time without there actually being a key event taking place. That actually, I guess this can be a really tricky part of it, is actually people can feel that depression and almost have this sense of I shouldn't be feeling like this because I've got a family, I've got a secure job, I've got a home, and be able to see that actually life around them on the surface and how it looks is actually good. So why don't I feel this sense of happiness or satisfaction in life? And that can feel really conflicting for the person that's going through it. Life looks good, it feels good, but I'm just not happy. So when we think about ways of making sense of maybe why we experience depression, a lot of what we sort of think about in CBT links with the cognitions or the thoughts that are there. So we often use Beck's theory to, one, understand depression, but also give us a pathway in terms of trying to improve those feelings over time. There's a few key themes just to sort of hold in mind when we think about this way of making sense of depression. One part of it is a cognitive bias, that when we're depressed, we have a bias that would sort of work against us when we're feeling depressed. So we notice all of this information that may confirm what we're already feeling. So if we're feeling depressed, we're likely to have sort of a different outlook or perspective because of what we're emotionally feeling. And as a result of that, our cognition and where we focus our attention is going to find information that backs that up and reinforces it. An example of sort of the cognitive bias I'm referring to could be where sort of information is very sort of generalised. So it could actually be kind of someone that has depression, maybe has sort of quite a negative view of themselves. Something happens and then they apply kind of a thought process or logic to it. I always get it wrong. I always make a mistake. And we've got a sort of one-off incident that then gets sort of generalised out to lots of different situations. And if we just think about that part of it to start off with, it's understandable what we feel emotionally if we were to isolate that one error compared to it being then generalised out to I always make a mistake, I'm never good enough. That's going to have a bit more clout to it and in turn make us feel more depressed. The second area to consider with the Beck depression model for CBT and understanding why we feel depressed is linking it to our self-schema. So what we mean by this is actually through early childhood experiences, and as we're sort of developing, we gain a sense of our world around us and also ourselves. So what we're talking about here is kind of how likeable we are, how lovable we are, our sense of sort of self-worth, our sense of belonging, our sense of acceptance, how acceptable we are to others, for example. What we find with when we sort of have feelings of depression is that these schemas that we carry, which are often experienced more of as a felt sense rather than other thoughts we have day to day, have become activated, or we're trying to sort of protect ourselves from them becoming activated. So you can kind of appreciate that actually for someone that maybe has a self-schema about kind of not being likeable, and then they're then trying to navigate day to day, that's going to feel very intense because they have this deep-seated feeling around kind of not being kind of liked by others, and actually that's going to be something that's going to come up over and over again if it's in the work arena or in their personal lives, for example, and it makes navigating day to day that much harder, and it's going to feel quite raw having kind of that deep felt sense that you're not likeable or lovable or good enough. That's going to really be having some sort of impact on what you're feeling emotionally within yourself day to day. Finally, we have got the cognitive triad. So the Beck model for depression suggests that there's an interaction between three key belief domains. So we've got our worldview, so that could be actually kind of someone that has depression may take a stance of the world being unfair. They would have their future views in terms of I'm never going to be good enough, and then their self views as well in terms of I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough. So you have this interaction between these three key domains that can understandably leave someone feeling quite hopeless or feel that things are really against them. What I guess kind of need to say at this point is that the thought patterns we develop and the schemas that we carry, none of that is our fault. And that's really important to mention. We're not choosing to think this way. We're not choosing to arrive at a certain conclusion. Our brains are really complex. So the way that we interpret and make sense of information and go through our day-to-day and those cognitive biases that we carry, these are all really automatic. The good news is, though, that actually whilst we can't help thinking that way, that process is very automatic, CBT is designed in a way to almost sort of acknowledge those areas where our brains are complex and they can contribute to us feeling depressed and offer alternative pathways, alternative responses, alternative ways of navigating these situations that can cause those feelings of depression and activate those kind of underlying schemas and beliefs that we carry. So far I've talked a bit about the symptoms of depression, and I've explained a bit around the theory around what we understand about why we experience depression. I'm now just going to finish off explaining about kind of the CBT strategies that get used, and if you needed some support, how you can get in touch. Cognitive behavioural therapy has been well documented to be really, really effective for supporting people that have got depression. It's one of the nice recommended treatments and can be hugely beneficial. The way that it works, I guess, holding in mind what I've sort of mentioned so far, is it targets sort of those two key components really. So we've got kind of all the cognitions and the schemas that people can experience, and strategies are designed to sort of start to loosen those areas up a little bit. Often what we find is that the schemas that we develop through life experiences or through those key developmental years, we don't actually take sort of time to slow down enough to challenge and see actually are they still applicable now. That they may have developed from certain experiences, but that may not be the case anymore, and there may be really valuable information and evidence that we can almost use to update that schema that was there, or give us a different perspective of the way that we're thinking about ourselves. And the way that we do that, it's really trying to shift from that felt sense that we have of a schema and really anchoring into the evidence that is available to us. So the strategies are designed to sort of uncover and test out predictions that maybe you carry about yourself or what you think was going to happen in certain situations, and offer you kind of that alternative narrative to carry and sort of update that belief system a bit. Other sort of ways that CBT can help is resting on the idea of the low levels of motivation that we can experience, and that I sort of mentioned at the start. So behavioural strategies would look at reintroducing activities that give a sense of purpose or meaning that or align with your values, in a way that also does feel like you're connecting with it, and in a way that does feel beneficial for your well-being as well. So rather than your world shrinking back because you're feeling less and less enjoyment or a sense of hopelessness about the future, it's about reconnecting with those areas that are really important for your well-being. So I hope you found this video helpful. In terms of kind of further support, you're more than welcome to sort of get in touch if you've got any questions. If you would like to get in touch, please complete my contact page, and my contact information can also be found below. Thank you very much.